And that's where we get back to the fundamental importance of education. And no government has given a greater priority, I think, in terms of the range of initiatives in education than this government of Julia. The outlays on education are extremely important, right from preschool all the way through, because the quality of education that a child gets is going to determine the quality of his or her life for the rest of their life, and is also going to determine the contribution they can make to this changing society. So I think she should be congratulated on that.
It's politics as a rough and tumble recently who said he was more idealistic at the end of his term on leaving office than he was beginning. And I wanted to get your opinion on your ideology. Is it holding firm? Is it getting watered down with the rough and tough of politics? I'm interested.
I think we're always going to have many, many questions, but that is a good question. I think your views, your values, your ideals stay true. I feel that for myself. You know what it is that is shaping your views, you know the values that lie deep within you, and you're taking them with you every day. It's really the difference between knowing where you want to get to and the kind of mechanics of making sure we get there. And the mechanics down in the engine room can be pretty mucky and pretty hot and pretty difficult. That's true. And a lot of politics, I know, hasn't made great edifying watching over the last 12 months or 2 years. We've seen an incredibly negative approach to politics taken in the federal parliament. And so, that I know sort of causes some distaste amongst people. But that day-to-day wrestle, that day-to-day kind of, pushing and pulling, really it's about a more important purpose. It is about where you want to see the nation, where you want to see its people, what we want to do for our kids, as Bob says, what we want to do to create opportunity for all of our children. All of that came with me into politics, and I think, I hope, like Bill Clinton, all of that will go with me out of politics whenever that is in the future. In the meantime, you do have to engage in the practical business of politics to get things done.
Room to rent, both in San Francisco and in Washington, D.C., and I looked up the classified ads, and it had R or D in brackets, that you wouldn't share a house with a Republican if you're a Democrat, and vice versa. It's actually now what you put in the ad to share a house. And there's this great division in the USA. People identify themselves as Republicans or Democrats, and I've witnessed this starting to develop in Australia, and I worry about whether it's going to split people down into you vote that way or you vote that way or you're a bad person, and it creates division. Is that the price we pay for modern democratic systems?
I think politics has always been about a big contest of ideas. I actually don't think that's changed. Maybe some of the language is harsher. Maybe that's a product of the current days in federal parliament, the approach that's been taken by the opposition. Maybe too it's reflected by the nature of social media. The immediacy of it is a fantastic thing, but the anonymity of it, I think, can make people harsher than they would be if they were dealing with someone face to face. Some of the things that people will say on Twitter, for example, they would never actually say to a human being who was sitting next to them. So I think some of those things are new, but the big contest of ideas isn't new. And you should be passionate about a big contest of ideas. That people bring emotion or energy to it is a good thing, not a bad thing. I'm certainly happy to see energy and emotion. It's really about making sure that energy and emotion is around, positive contests, which way should we go. A lot of the American stuff is actually a contest about the role of government, with sharply different views about the role of government. I think we've got those sharply different views about the role of government here too. But we end up resolving them when we vote, and we'll end up resolving that in 2013 when people have a vote at the forthcoming election.
Thank you. The world went into turmoil in 2009, 9 with the banking system that's caused serious problems right through to third world countries. Have we fixed the problems? I also notice it's a double-bung question that you spent some time with Barack Obama, and there's a great affinity in this country for Barack Obama. So this banking issue that's created a global financial crisis, has it been fixed? Is the crisis over? We read so many conspiracy theories of we're being controlled by the wealthy and the rich. I wouldn't mind your response to this banking crisis and the global financial crisis, and how do you see it rolling out?
Well, I think there are really two big problems, one causing the other. Problem number one was the global financial crisis, the banking system crisis. That did very counterintuitive that a problem in the American mortgage market could end up reverberating around the world, but it did because of how linked our banking system is and the way in which products had been put together and how risk hadn't been properly priced, and that is what caused the contagion in the banking system. And once a contagion starts, once the fever starts, then it gets very irrational. That we could have been sitting here in Australia worrying about how the world would react to our banks if we didn't offer them government guarantees, when there was absolutely nothing wrong with them. Australian banks were sound, nothing wrong with them, but the fever in the market was such that with other governments moving to guarantee their banks, if we didn't move to guarantee our banks, then that could have caused, an incredible problem for our banking system. So some of those immediately resolved: better regulation, better international regulation. What hasn't been resolved yet is that financial crisis then caused problems in the real economy, where people work and live and get jobs or don't get jobs. And that isn't resolved yet. In the US, growth is still weak, and the US could be driven back into recession if the politics doesn't enable President Obama to work out this fiscal cliff issue. And certainly in Europe, we are going to see Europe, before this growth does affect us. We've been more resilient in the face of it than others around the world. But we should never forget there are millions and millions of working people around the world who are now in the hopelessness of unemployment because this financial crisis started and then it hit into the real economy. And, we've all got to take responsibility for making sure that the economic decisions we take for the future don't allow that kind of misery to happen again. I mean, that someone in Italy or Greece or Spain could be living a life of quiet desperation because of things that started far away from them is really cruel and unfair, and yet that's the lot of millions of working people around the world.
Bob, are you an optimist when it comes to looking at the future of the planet? There's a lot of problems out there. There's a global population crisis, there's wars, there's terrorism, technology and development of weapons. Are you an optimist still?
Yes, I'm still an optimist, but I must say that I get terribly annoyed when I see the inadequacy of political leadership in other parts of the world. Julia mentioned Europe. The fundamental definition of the problem in Europe, and that is that they've attempted to establish a sort of economic union, but it's a hybrid thing. They've acted on the monetary side, but they haven't acted on the fiscal side, that is to coordinate and have central control over regard to the levels of expenditure and revenue and budget. The thing that bloody well annoys me is that they know what needs to be done. They know. So that's one of the things that worries me, Bill. The quality of leadership overseas. I mean, if you look at the world, I think this is the first time that you can say since the end of the Second World War, when you look around the world, look at the rest of the world, there hasn't been at least one outstanding political leader out there. and